On this Monday night, new echoes of Germany's Nazi past. Fears for the future as the far right rises again.
They want to get rid of basically everybody who has a migrant background.
Our Dawna Friesen reports from Berlin. Plenty of promises, too little action.
I think that we need more than commitment.
The criticism the feds have failed, missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. Where should nuclear waste be buried? The difficult decisions dividing some Canadian communities. And Canada finally clinches a spot in the Stanley Cup final.
Oilers, let's go!
The hopes Edmonton will bring home the hardware.
Global National with Dawna Friesen. Reporting tonight, Farah Nasser.
Good evening to you. Thanks for joining us. This week, we will be bringing you reports from Europe covering the lead up to D-Day on June 6th, the turning point in the Second World War that led to the defeat of the Nazis 80 years ago. And as the world prepares to commemorate this historic anniversary, a new but familiar battle is being waged in Europe. Extreme far-right sentiments, once buried under the weight of history, are surfacing with alarming force. This year, D-Day, June 6th, will also see elections for the European Parliament. And it's feared Europe may be once again going down a dark path. Dawna Friesen is in the German capital.
I'm at the Brandenburg Gate in the heart of Berlin, a city where the Nazis were finally defeated in 1945 and Adolf Hitler took his own life. Now something unthinkable is happening. A nationalist, anti-immigrant, far-right party is on the rise here. Its leaders use Nazi slogans and sound like descendants of history's tyrants.
It's a party at a German resort, and listen to what they're chanting.
Deutschland in Deutschland!
Deutschland for Deutsche, Germany for the Germans. These young people are singing Nazi slogans. Ausländer raus means foreigners out. And this is the Nazi salute, a chilling example of how the far right is coming out of the shadows in Germany. The country has strict laws banning Nazi phrases, gestures, and symbols, but they're increasingly being ignored. This is Chemnitz, a former East German city known as a hub for extremists. Uwe Chubala runs Shalom Restaurant here and tells me anti-Semitism that used to exist beneath the surface is now out in the open.
100%, also it's 100%.
And it's the worst it's been, he says, since the Nazi era. A pig's head marked with the Star of David was left on his doorstep, and a group of men attacked his restaurant with rocks. Violent anti-immigrant groups roamed Chemnitz, threatening and attacking people after a local man was stabbed and killed by a Syrian.
In the Second World War, it was not that long ago. Have people forgotten?
Das weiß ich nicht.
I don't know, he says. It's not just anti-Semitism. Supporters of the far right believe Germany is no longer German enough, that too many immigrants and asylum seekers have been allowed in. And a new far-right party, the AfD, is capitalizing on that. Formed in 2013, polling shows it's now the second most popular party in Germany. It's poised to win power in 3 German states and projected to make big gains in the European Parliament elections this week.
Panzerfahrzeugen geschützt werden müssen.
Its most prominent member is Björn Höcke. He's been fined for using the Nazi phrase Alles für Deutschland, everything for Germany, a motto that was engraved on stormtroopers' daggers. Höcke, a history teacher, claims he didn't know. His critics call him a straight-up Nazi.
Vertreibung von Millionen von Menschen.
Then this explosive documentary revealed a secret meeting of AfD members and known neo-Nazis.
Are meetings of neo-Nazis in Germany common?
Neo-Nazis meet in Germany all the time. But the thing that made our investigation special is that we could show that neo-Nazis meet with high-ranking people of the AfD, of this party that pretends not to be a neo-Nazi party at all.
On the agenda, according to investigative journalists, a master plan for Germany.
And that master plan said that they want to get rid of basically everybody who has a migrant background.
And how many people were they talking about?
Millions.
The response was outrage across the country. Tens of thousands took to the streets. A firewall, they said, against the far right. These two men belong to a group called Generation Identity, which Germany's domestic security agency has classified as extremist.
Patriotisch bedeutet mit.
We're just patriotic youth, they tell me.
You know what your critics say and fear, right? And that you are, in fact, neo-Nazis just with a friendlier face.
Das ist eine sehr schwere Anschuldigung.
That is a serious accusation, they say, which our critics cannot back up with evidence.
Dort eine Verbindung zu ziehen ist.
Ultimately, we want to preserve our people and our identity that has been built up for centuries, no more and no less. Not far away at Shalom Restaurant is Uwe Chubala.
Is peace in Europe guaranteed?
Tja. I don't know.
A country conscious of its Nazi past, now deeply anxious about the future. Dawna Friesen, Global News, Berlin.
Tomorrow, Dawna will look at the European immigration crisis fueling the rise of the far right. And later this week, she'll be reporting from France for our special coverage of D-Day's 80th anniversary. We have some breaking news from Alberta, where cameras were rolling when what appears to be a tornado struck this afternoon. Take a look at this.
Oh my God.
This is near the village of Edinburgh, about 90 minutes southeast of Edmonton. You can see what appears to be a tornado touching down in some nearby fields. From what we understand, no damage has been reported. Tornado watches are in effect for this area and for other parts of east central Alberta. In Cuba, one person's dead after a vehicle collision involving a bus carrying dozens of Quebec tourists. The accident happened yesterday when a car collided with the bus and caused it to overturn. The driver of the car was killed, while 26 people on the bus were injured. Mike Armstrong has more.
This is video shared on social media showing a bus that had been carrying Canadians. According to Air Transat, there were 38 passengers on board. They were on their way to the Santa Clara airport in Cuba for a flight back to Montreal. The bus collided with a car and rolled over. The driver of that vehicle, according to local media, was killed.
On essayait de se dépêcher de sortir le plus rapidement possible.
This Canadian passenger says people on the bus tried to get out as quickly as possible, but struggled to get an emergency exit door open. There was a strong smell of gasoline. Now, the accident happened in a town only about 15 minutes from the airport. There were reports 26 people needed medical attention, including 6 children. Some were taken first to a local hospital, but were then transferred to a pediatric hospital and another facility in Santa Clara. One person is described as being in serious condition. Air Transat says it's found accommodations in nearby hotels for passengers who are still under observation or injured. It's working on a repatriation flight to get people home. Mike Armstrong, Global News, Montreal.
In Israel tonight, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is facing intense pressure from within his government. It all has to do with the ceasefire deal it proposed that involves some concessions with Hamas. Tonight, one of Netanyahu's top lieutenants is saying there's no way he would support any deal that falls short of obliterating Hamas. That's hardline National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir blasting his country's leader for what he calls a reckless deal to end the war without first ending Hamas. He's threatening to break up the government unless the proposal is scrapped. The latest snag in the peace talks also means Israel's assault on Gaza is not letting up. Today, an attack on a home in central Gaza killed 4 members of a family, including 3 children. Indigenous communities received a long overdue apology from the University of Manitoba today over remains and important cultural objects that were stolen.
The University of Manitoba recognizes that healing begins with this university apologizing to the people we have profoundly hurt and deeply harmed.
The university's president formally apologizing to First Nations, Inuit and Métis for its history of taking ancestral remains, burial belongings and cultural heritage without consent. Part of a respectful rematriation and repatriation ceremony acknowledging the harms it caused and to help with healing. Efforts are underway to return the items to their rightful communities. The National Chief of the Assembly of First Nations is blasting the federal government for failing to do more to address the ongoing crisis of murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls. Today marks 5 years since the National Inquiry's final report. It listed more than 200 calls to action to help combat the epidemic. But Cindy Woodhouse Nepinak says most of them have not been fulfilled. Mackenzie Gray joins us now with more on the allegations as well as the government's response to them. Mackenzie.
Farah, the Prime Minister has always maintained his most important relationship is with Indigenous people, but one of Canada's most influential First Nations leaders is firing back at Justin Trudeau.
Even though there has been commitments by words, I think that we need more than commitments. We need action.
Assembly of First Nations Chief Cindy Woodhouse Nepinak calling on the federal government to follow through on implementing the calls to justice from the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls report on its 5-year anniversary.
Regrettably, the report's findings indicate that only 2 of the calls for justice impacting First Nations have been fully implemented over the past 5 years. With the majority showing minimal to no progress, this failure is not acceptable to our people.
And I will have to take issue with that particular number.
The Minister for Crown-Indigenous Relations disputing the government has only implemented 2 of the 231 recommendations.
Roughly 107 have been advanced by us, which is solely in the federal jurisdiction or shared jurisdiction, and 53 more have been, which are broadly advanced, have been addressed by us.
While jurisdictional issues play a role in implementing actions, key calls including establishing a National Indigenous Human Rights Ombudsperson and a National Indigenous Human Rights Tribunal have not been implemented, despite being in the purview of the federal government.
This is appalling because the Prime Minister called the current crisis of violence against Indigenous women and girls an ongoing genocide.
While the politics play out, Indigenous women continue to be at risk, as the 2019 report says they are 12 times more likely to be missing or murdered compared to non-Indigenous people. Farah.
Mackenzie Gray in Ottawa, thank you. Never before disclosed. Coming up, what we're learning from a parliamentary committee on foreign interference. The federal government is launching 2 new pilot programs to provide caregivers from abroad with permanent residency in this country.
For decades, generations of foreign domestic workers and caregivers have fought hard for this recognition. I believe these changes will provide families with the services they need and continue to advance protections for home care workers.
Immigration Minister Mark Miller says caregivers hoping to work in Canada will be able to apply for the programs if they meet certain criteria, including having a job offer. Once they arrive here, they will be given permanent resident status. The new program will replace one set to end in 2 weeks. Also on Parliament Hill today, another key report on foreign interference, this time by a special all-party committee of MPs. Members of the National Security Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians, or NSICOP, have security clearance to be able to review top-secret classified material and conduct its own review over allegations of foreign meddling in Canada's last 2 elections. Our chief political correspondent, David Aiken, joins us now. David, what's new in NSICOP's own take on this issue?
Well, first of all, Farah, we have what seems to be a never-before-disclosed incident of foreign interference. The NSICOP report says that a member of Parliament, quote, wittingly provided information to a foreign state. Now, NSICOP's members are clear to see the top-secret CSIS information about this, but NSICOP could not name the MP, it did not say when this happened, and it did not identify the foreign state in play. And when we asked the Public Safety Minister about it, he refused to comment.
I want to be careful not to comment on specific matters, intelligence matters.
In any event, NSICOP, and it's worth saying this once again, that this is an all-party committee, NSICOP said this was a, quote, particularly concerning case in which a sitting MP maintained a relationship with a foreign intelligence officer and that MP sought to arrange a meeting in a foreign state with a senior intelligence official. The NSICOP report said that MP also proactively provided the foreign intelligence officer with information provided in confidence. Now, the NSICOP report does go over much of the same ground as the public inquiry and other investigations we've already seen, but One interesting focus unique to NSICOP is parliamentarians and how foreign actors target them and their work. NSICOP says the government and the country's security agencies need to do a better job to help MPs, senators, and their staff be aware of foreign interference and that they should get better and more timely intelligence briefings. Farah.
David Aiken in Ottawa. Thank you, David. Where should Canada put tons of radioactive waste? Coming up, the question creating rifts in some communities. It has been more than a decade since the Nuclear Waste Management Organization began looking for a permanent place to dispose of Canada's spent fuel. 22 potential sites have now been narrowed down to 2, both in Ontario. As Eric Sorensen explains, those communities are now weighing the risks and benefits of becoming the final resting place of nuclear waste.
Where to bury Canada's most radioactive nuclear waste, in tree-covered northern Ontario or rolling farmland in the south. In South Bruce, some farmers are willing to sell their land. Some clearly are not. Jim and Sharon McDonald's family have farmed here for generations.
I completely don't want it. Yeah. This is right beside my family.
In South Bruce, this could be, in effect, ground zero. The Nuclear Waste Management Organization has secured contracts for this property, the one across the way, and for several more in both directions. A half kilometre or more below here, Canada's nuclear waste repository could be built. The potential sites just outside Teeswater cover some 1,500 acres. The McDonald's farm is right next door.
Friends don't talk to friends anymore, and it's put a real rift in the community.
This is also the traditional land of the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, and they're not convinced yet either.
What we do today is actually going to affect our grandchildren or even our great-great-grandchildren.
From South Bruce to the north, where the repository would be located on provincial land between Ignace and the Wabigoon Lake Ojibwe Nation. Here, too, both communities must approve for the project to go ahead.
It's not a chief and council decision, it's an everybody decision.
It's a big deal for us. Who is going to be chosen? What community is willing to take that?
No dumping! Dump!
Opponents fear a radiation leak or an accident transporting the waste up to thousands of kilometers from temporary storage, mostly at nuclear plants in Ontario, Quebec, and New Brunswick.
It will have an impact on all of the other cities and municipalities that are along the transportation route.
We don't want to oppose this project.
The Nuclear Waste Management Organization has had its work cut out. Years of staging forums demonstrating the safety of a nuclear waste repository while promising millions of dollars in economic upgrades and jobs.
Farming isn't paying the bills anymore.
The mayor of South Bruce believes the project will be safe and rewarding.
This is the project that's probably the biggest economic development that South Bruce will ever see in its lifetime.
Outside the main forum, opponents see a different economic future, the stigma from a nuclear waste site.
We are an agricultural community, and the potential with losing markets for our products.
The NWMO hopes all the communities will vote this year and at least one site will be approved.
This needs to be addressed now. It's not right to punt this challenge to future generations and leave it for them to solve.
Farmer Dave Hawkins has been taking it all in.
These people here are very convincing.
But you're not convinced?
I haven't made up my mind yet.
But he says he will vote, a vote that could redefine the future of one Ontario community. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Mildmay, Ontario.
Keeping hope alive. Next, the hysteria in Edmonton after the Oilers reached the Stanley Cup final. A Canadian team hasn't hoisted hockey's ultimate prize in over 3 decades. But don't lose hope, because Edmonton is keeping the dream alive. Last night, the Oilers were crowned best in the West, advancing to the Stanley Cup final after beating the Dallas Stars in Game 6. And already, as Heather Yorks West explains, Canadians from coast to coast to coast are riding the Oilers bandwagon.
Edmonton elated.
It's crazy, I can't believe it! Go Edmonton! We got a W, we believe! We believe! Oilers, let's go!
With a spot in the Stanley Cup final, the Oilers now have a chance to do what no Canadian team has done in more than 30 years, though a few have come heartbreakingly close.
I was heartbroken when we lost in Game 7. It's been 18 years.
The Canucks, the Flames, the Oilers, and then the Canucks again, taking the push for Lord Stanley's Cup all the way to Game 7, only to face soul-crushing defeat every time.
The emotion, everybody in Edmonton knows about the decade of darkness, 10 years without making the playoffs. And so this is just so hard to believe.
Having a Canadian team in the final can be a confusing time for fans. Old rivalries are hard to shake. And for Calgary fans, there are 3 former Flames on that Florida squad.
Seeing the former Flames players in Florida, there's a little bit of a reason to cheer there.
In Montreal, we just don't like the Leafs.
But in the last Canadian city to win it all, fans are ready to cheer Edmonton on.
We're rooting for them,
Why?
Guys, Canada, it's been how many years that we...
Since 1993.
Exactly, so this year's the year, hopefully.
Puck drops for Game 1 of the Stanley Cup Final Saturday night. Heather Yurex West, Global News, Calgary.
And the country will be watching. That's it for Global National for this Monday night. I'm Farah Nasser. On behalf of our whole crew here, I want to thank you so much for spending part of your evening with us. Tonight's Your Canada is Tautildau. It's a large volcanic plug near Masset, British Columbia. We love seeing Your Canada, so please keep emailing us your photos to viewers@globalnational.com. Until tomorrow, take care of yourselves and take care of each other. Good night.